Gallagher live in
So
Los
confirmation from authorities in the United States that, yes, this was a collision with American Airlines Flight 5342 with a Sikorsky helicopter. Ash Gillen is with me. This is a military aircraft and a commercial regional jet, Ash. And as our colleagues at Fox were just saying, they're likely from Kansas. But we don't have any confirmation of the number of people on board that plane, which has crashed into the Potomac near Reagan National Airport in Virginia. However, we're hearing it could be upwards of 60 individuals. In fact, Ashley Gillen, if you can stay there, I want to go live back to our colleagues at Fox. Let's have a listen.
The plane has not yet been identified, but that flight usually flies what is known as a CRJ 700, which is a twin jet airline, and listed tonight when it took off from Wichita, Kansas to land at Reagan National Airport. The plane was also listed as a CRJ 700. These planes, and again, we do not know how many passengers were on board, but we know these planes can carry up to 78 passengers. So as you can see, and we will show you video of this in a short time, there is other video that shows them launching boats into the Potomac River to try and go seek to find if there are any survivors, if there are any people in the water at all. That is one of the shots we are looking at, loading people to go in. You can see both rescue teams. There will be dive teams as well. It is fascinating to look at this because on the other side, we could point out that just a week ago, when we were there for the inauguration, that part of the river was primarily frozen over. So you see tonight here, it is an all-hands-on-deck response. There was word earlier that it was a small plane, and now we have gotten word from the FAA that this is, in fact, an American Airlines commuter flight from Wichita, Kansas, heading to Reagan National Airport that crashed on approach, that it struck a military Sikorsky 860 helicopter. And right now, we do not know how many people were on board. But I want to bring in search and rescue expert Armin Kurdian and Fox News contributor Richard Fowler, who was near the scene when it happened. I'd like to begin with you, Richard. I want to know what you saw, what you heard, and what you're hearing now.
Live on the D.C. side of the Potomac River. And literally, as I was driving on the 295 expressway, which is not on the other side of the river, which you can overlooking the airport, I saw all of the cop cars gathering, all of the sirens, and then literally on the sort of, I guess that'd be the side of the expressway going towards the airport, you saw loads of ambulances, loads of emergency vehicles headed towards the scene. And at that point in time, I then pulled over to the side to figure out what was happening. Then I realized there was a crash right off of Reagan Airport. Just so folks get a sense of what I'm trying to say here, is oftentimes with the smaller jets that are landing on that runway there, they oftentimes sort of cut a little bit, not too far from my house, right over Bolling Air Force Base to make that landing. And so it's oftentimes in my neighborhood that you hear the air traffic noise as those planes land. So it's very customary to hear these regional jets land often. It happens all the time, in the morning, in the evening, depending upon sort of the wind pattern. And so it's customary you hear them, but to see that level of sirens at this time of night, you're like, wow, something's really happening at Reagan National Airport, when I realized that there was indeed an accident. And then obviously called the news desk and came here. I feel my heart goes out to everybody who's in this accident. I spent a lot of time at Reagan Airport, and I've taken this path a number of times and landed on that runway a number of times. And so it's definitely heart-wrenching for most folks who live in the District of Columbia.
Yeah, it really is. If you would stand by for a second, Rich, I want to read this because this just in from the FAA press office. It says, and warning here, the information is preliminary and subject to change, but it goes on to say a PSA Airlines Bombardier CRJ 700 regional jet collided in midair with a Sikorsky 60 helicopter while on approach to runway 33 at Reagan Washington National Airport around 9 p.m. local time. PSA was operating as Flight 5342 for American Airlines. It departed from Wichita, Kansas. The FAA, the NTSB will investigate. The NTSB, of course, will take the lead on that, which, of course, is standard operating procedure. What they don't note on this is that there were, passengers on board. We do not know how many, but we do know that a CRJ 700, the Bombardier plane, is a twin jet engine, and it can hold up to 78 passengers. Unclear how many are actually on board or how many crew members. It is usually a pilot, a co-pilot, and one, maybe two flight attendants on that. And Richard Fowler, how quick was the response if you heard something? And by the way, we do have video. We are making sure that this video is accurate. We want to check it before we put it on the air. But there is video of this crash, we believe, and as soon as we can verify that and confirm that it is actually the video, we will show it to you. That might just take us a few minutes here. Richard Fowler, very quickly to you, what kind of response and how quick was the response?
The response was almost instantaneous. Not only did you saw emergency cars coming from all different directions. I think the geography here is very important because you have sort of the intersection of three states. You have Maryland, you have Virginia, and you also have the District of Columbia. And based on the cars that you were seeing, and you also have the federal government. So you saw federal government cars responding. You also had Maryland emergency teams responding, as well as Virginia teams responding. And so what you'll see on the scene is, as we get more footage, is you'll see teams from three different states, as well as the federal government, all responding to the scene, which is a good thing for many of these, if there are potential victims here, is you'll see all of these teams responding at the same time, just because of the geography of Reagan International Airport, which sits in Virginia, but also sits in the District of Columbia because of how it's sort of built out. Parts of it, there's a sliver of it that is actually geographically in the District of Columbia, but a majority of it is in Arlington, Virginia. So because of its geography, it benefits from having three states respond to this disaster in this moment.
Yeah, it really does. Richard, thank you. Stand by, if you will. I want to bring in the host of the Fox Report, John Scott, who is also a licensed pilot. John, great to hear from you. It's been a long time. You and I have been covering these types of plane crashes now for almost 30 years on Fox News Channel. When you hear about this, and one of the reasons I bring that up, John, is because, quite frankly, in this country, I don't believe there has been a commercial airline disaster since back in 2009 when the Colgan Air flight heading to Buffalo crashed, killing, I think, 49 people on that jet. John Scott, what do you believe? What do you know? And what do you think about the crash this evening?
Well, it's obviously very preliminary, and it'll be 6 months. It'll be 6 months or more before we get anything from the NTSB. But right. I just have to wonder where the helicopter was, and was the helicopter where it was supposed to be? These flights in and out of Reagan are so tightly choreographed, and the autopilot basically takes the jet, right where it's supposed to be and almost plants it down on the runway. In some cases, can do that, and the pilots. Reagan has the shortest runways in commercial aviation in this country. So the pilots who are flying in there generally, are very experienced and very good at what they do. So I just have to wonder what the helicopter was doing, and was it in the right place at the right time? Yeah.
And there's been controversy, John. I mean, there's talk about maybe shutting this airport down in the past years because of the congestion in and around that area. And that's one of the things that the FAA and the NTSB has looked at over the years. And it's a very good, question to wonder, how does a military helicopter, because they are supposed to be in sync, right? There's supposed to be communication between both of those aircraft, and it appears that something horribly went wrong, John.
Right, and there is a fairly new system. Within the last 3 or 4 years, the FAA has mandated what they call ADS-B, which is it's a surveillance system that allows ground controllers to see precisely where every aircraft is. And, you know, where in the past radar sweeps would be a little slow and maybe a little bit off, now this newish system, ADS-B, tells you exactly where every other aircraft is, and it tells the pilots where other aircraft are. So unless, you know, maybe the helicopter was flying without it because of some, you know, I've not been in the military, frankly, and they might have some reason to turn off an ADS-B transponder. But those two pilots, the helicopter and the jet, should have seen each other on their displays. Right. And the ground crew, you know, the tower crew at Reagan should have deconflicted them.
Yeah. You know, you talk about a commuter plane, John, and a commuter jet like this. And, you know, back in the old days, you would say, well, you had these twin-engine props, and they weren't as sophisticated as some of these, you know, the Boeing 737s, 47s, and the Airbus airplanes. But nowadays, when you talk about the Bombardier CRJ700 twin, this is a very sophisticated airline. It has got every bell and whistle that the major airlines and the big jets have.
Right. It's got those glass cockpits, you know, which are, you know, state of the art. And it's one of the reasons that it's so easy and so precise to fly these days, because you literally are looking at a map. You can program the instrument approach into the airport, and you can watch on the map. The pilot can monitor on the map as the plane is turning itself to align with, in this case, runway 33, as I understand it, but they didn't get there because, you know, there was an obstacle.
Right. And just by the way, Jennifer Griffin is now reporting, and I'm going to read this, what she put in. She says the Pentagon is now checking on a report that a U.S. military Black Hawk helicopter was involved in the crash. Of course, we have told you that the military has come out, the FAA, the NTSB come out saying a Sikorsky H-60 was involved. Joint Base Bowling, Jennifer says, is on the opposite side of the river from Reagan National Airport. So when you have that kind of, you know, you have that kind of military base, when you have an active airport that is very busy, there would be communication between the two, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There should be. And, you know, the problem is those systems are only as good as the people who are running them. I mean, I've used the wrong frequency coming into an airport in the past because, you know, it takes one click of the dial and you're not on the right frequency. And that, you know, could have been what happened here. It's way too early to say, but it's obviously very, very tragic. And, you know, it brings to mind the Air Florida crash back in the early 1980s, right, when that Air Florida, I think it was a 737, went into the Potomac. It's just so terrible this time of year.